Do you hate when people show up to your house unannounced?
Oh, wow.
Right?
Check.
Because I'm like, right? I'm like, that says so much.
Can anybody else relate to the feeling of dreading people stopping by?
I want to do well. Like I'm not a lazy person, but it seems on paper like I am. And then you get really frustrated and you're like, no wonder we're so depressed and cynical and frustrated all the time because it's like nobody sees how hard we were trying.
That is Katy Weber, a fellow coach and host of the wildly successful Women and ADHD podcast. And I was very excited to meet with her. So, what's different for women anyway?
Do you think that women have much more of a responsibility, like domestically, to do everything and to manage the house, the calendar?
Clutter, cleaning, cooking.
Also, we were taught that especially our generation was like, we were taught by our feminist parents that you can do it all, right? You don't have to be a homemaker. You should have a job, but you should also be a parent and you should also love it and you should do all these things. And I feel like we just have a lot more on our plates naturally that is really, really difficult when you struggle with executive function. But I think we also have a really hard time asking for help because we feel a lot of pressure to do it all.
And Katy says that her therapist actually suggested that she saw some red flags.
Time and time again that I look into ADHD whenever I would talk about some of the issues that, like, I was starting a new business,
Decluttering.
losing interest in it after 6 months and going nowhere with it and feeling like a total failure. Or always sort of feeling like I wasn't excelling, and always feeling like I was trying new things and never doing very well at them. And then I had mentioned at one point, having a lot of difficulty in school and often thinking I might have an undiagnosed learning disorder in school because I felt like I would either get an A plus or like an F. And so there were just sort of little things here and there where she would say, have you looked into ADHD? And I would think like, I don't really think I mean, maybe I have it. I don't know. Like, I just was like, I didn't relate to it. I didn't feel like I had a deficit of attention.
Now, being diagnosed can be crazy for some of us, though. How many of us have done online tests? They can be a wee bit vague.
So I took an online self-test that was a generic online self-test for adults, and it was a lot of the questions you see in the diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, where it was like, are you run by a motor? Do you feel like you can't sit still? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't relate to it. There are a few things about disorganization and forgetfulness where I was like, yeah, I guess so, but aren't we all?
But finding a test that gets to the deeper level is a bigger importance.
Then when I took the self-test specifically for women, that was written by Sari Solden on the Attitude Magazine website, that was where it just like hit me like a ton of bricks, where her questions were much more around the emotional element of, have you had trouble historically with friendships? Do you often feel like you are letting people down?
Only constantly?
Do and it was like some of these questions that just felt like they got to the core of who I've been my whole life. So like stuff like that. It was a lot of stuff around domestic life and being a woman.
And women are different than men. We're not just tiny little men. Our lives are completely different. Our brains are developed differently. So obviously, like so many other things, we're going to have different signs and symptoms.
This was explaining every seemingly random issue and struggle I had had throughout my whole life from middle school on.
Another reason we might fall through the cracks and struggle is that we don't want to stand out, so we avoid asking for help. And sometimes when we hear some of the more common symptoms, we're like, oh my gosh, that actually is me. We can get a lot more clarity. And as little girls in school, a lot of things might have been missed. Girls aren't often the kids causing a ton of the havoc in the classroom that the boys might be.
I was looking back over my report cards after I was diagnosed, and that was a really emotional process in itself. I remember getting very crying over looking at this, very young girl who, like, in kindergarten and first grade, my teachers were like, she's a leader, she's enthusiastic, she loves reading, all of these things. And then I went into the gifted program in the third grade, and it felt like something really shifted once I was in the gifted program, where my report cards started saying things like, she's very bright but doesn't apply herself.
Robyn is a great leader, but talks too much.
And there was always a but, right? It was like Katie's very, she loves trying new things, but doesn't finish her projects, on time. And I was always very chatty like you. I remember often getting separated from the group, and like oftentimes my desk would end up being next to my teacher's desk.
Yes.
I remember that a lot. And
That, plus getting in trouble at home or social problems, could really wreak havoc with our self-esteem.
I want to do well. Like I'm not a lazy person, but it seems on paper like I am. And then you get really frustrated and you're like, no wonder we're so depressed and cynical and frustrated all the time, because it's like nobody sees how hard we were trying.
But then something can come along, one tiny catalyst, and destroy our house of cards. For me, it was having my third child. I was doing okay before that, but I went to my doctor and I said, I can't remember anything. I can't manage all of these things. And she said, you just have 3 kids. What? For Katy, it was the pandemic.
Yeah, I was diagnosed during the pandemic. And I think that was really the catalyst for a lot of things. It was lockdown. My kids were home. My husband was home. All of a sudden, like I didn't have our house, a person to clean my house anymore. And it was like, I, like many women during the pandemic, I was like really, really struggling with suddenly being the chef and the teacher and the butler and all of these roles all at once and having no time to myself.
Since I have decluttered and consciously, like intentionally kept my environment clean, like going back and decluttering again, I've had major benefits. I can focus more.
Perfectly. Like, I feel like if you're in a position where you can set yourself up for success, then absolutely an ADHD brain is an amazing gift. And that's what I try to work on with my clients, is like, how can you work with your brain instead of against it? And sometimes if you're in an environment that's hostile to an ADHD brain, like sitting in a classroom all day or at a 9 to 5 job at a desk, there's going to be environments where your ADHD brain is going to really, really be unhappy. But if you're an entrepreneur, like many of us are, if you're following paths, if you've got a million different side projects and you love it and all of that stuff, then go at it. Like, I think there's a lot of times where the sky's the limit.
So ADHD, it's not all bad. There's actually a lot of really great things to it. And some people say they would never trade them away. I don't know if that's true for all of us, but there's creativity, there's hyper-focus, there's compassion, so many things that a lot of us have actually more of. Like intentionally kept my environment clean, like going back and decluttering again. But if you want to learn how to lasso that focus and get better at it, check out this video here. I made it all for people who want to actually learn how to harness their focus, even if you don't have ADHD. And thank you so much for Katy for doing this interview with me. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.